All right. Elton John, Mona Lisa, and Mad Hatters. I don't know why I was thinking about Elton John this morning. Very melancholy. But it's a melancholy show because we're losing a good colleague here, Robert Jaffe, who's been the longtime senior advisor to the president and will be retiring at the end of this month. Welcome,
Welcome. Thank you,
Robert.
Hugo. How are you today?
Very good. I got my friend of mine sent me this shirt from Nebraska.
Ah,
Came into town
so what is
the other
the
day.
what is the insignia exactly?
He works for some aviation company.
Cool.
He was like in the service and he worked on jets or something. And he sent me some text saying, "Do you wear polo shirts?" I said, "Yeah." So there you go. Then he offered me he told me if there's any empty, it turns out it's like some sort of private jet company. So sometimes they fly back empty. So if I want to go to Lincoln, uh, I'll look out for a message, get a free flight to Lincoln, Nebraska.
could be
Then I got to get
could
back
be
here.
worse places to go visit. I think Lincoln's supposed to be pretty nice, actually.
I've always, yeah, Nebraska is amazing. The prairie, the whole thing, and Milliken was from there. Remember
Of
J.B.
course,
Milliken, our former chancellor?
right? Of course.
So, yeah, we talked about the format, and I wanted to give you first an opportunity to talk a little bit about your background. Where you're from, your studies, things like that before LaGuardia.
Sounds good. Well, again, thank you for having me on. A few more days to go at LaGuardia. So I've been at LaGuardia about 13 years and came in to work with President Mello, Gail, and had a fantastic run with her. And then obviously worked with Paul as interim president and then stayed on to help with the transition and continued to work with Kenneth, which has been another extraordinary experience. So my LaGuardia time has been over those 13 years working with three different presidents, which has given me an amazing opportunity to learn from some really, really smart, dedicated people. Prior to coming to LaGuardia, I won't go through everything, but basically my work has been around how do you take ideas and proposals and turn them into either laws or items in a budget. So I worked in the legislature many, many years ago. Coming out of college, it was kind of my first real job. I did a little stint at NYPIRG, a New York Public Interest Research Group, which is an incredible training ground for many people to learn about how to do community organizing and learn how to do media and learn how to kind of build advocacy campaigns. Worked in the legislature for a few years and then went to work for a public interest oriented lobbying firm that represented all the good guys, disability related groups. I represented Gay Men's Health Crisis and a number of AIDS organizations, represented childcare organizations, mental health providers, worked on a whole range of issues that really gave me a chance to kind of tone up those skills around how do you, again, take ideas and turn them into policy and into laws or get items into a budget. And then left there and went to work for, at that point it was called NARAL, New York, which was the National Abortion and Reproductive Rights Action League. So spent about 11 years as executive vice president there, working on improving access to birth control and abortion, both here in New York, and then we spun off a national organization, which is now known as the National Institute for Reproductive Health. I'm still on the board, which really focuses on trying to build proactive policies in red states around birth control. So for instance, in Austin, Texas, we just got some money from the local government to support women getting abortions to go out of state because the city government can do that kind of thing. Obviously, on a state level, that's impossible. So I spent about 10, 11 years working on abortion rights and birth control access. Did a very short gig at the New York Academy of Medicine, which was going to be a place that I thought I would be there for a long time, and got a call from the governor's office, then Governor Spitzer, and was offered a senior position in the Spitzer administration, helping to coordinate their release of kind of public policy issues. They had had a tough 11 months, so I came in December and they had had a rough kind of first year. And the idea was that I was going to help them settle in and build ties with progressive groups here in New York and figure out how to better launch the governor's initiative. And then, as people know, Spitzer had a bit of a car crash with his own life. And about 4 months later, he went down as governor, and I stayed on for Patterson, and then had this amazing opportunity to come to CUNY. Met with the chancellor, met with Gail, and then it was essentially we got married.
Who was the chancellor? Was it still
It was
Goldstein?
Yeah, Matt Goldstein was the chancellor at that point.
So, you know,
and I think the chancellor said immediately once he got chatting with me, "You got to go meet Gail Mello." Like, he knew that Gail and I would connect, and that her agenda around elevating the role of community colleges here in New York and nationally, and her goals around making access to community college easier and putting more money in community colleges, that I could be of benefit and service to her. So we met, and 2 weeks later, I was sitting in the office I'm in now.
Yeah, it's funny because I just always think of you being there with Gail. So the fact that, you know, about 13 years ago is just about the time I became full time as well. So that makes sense. I just assume when I assume people have always been here. You know, a lot of people assumed or believed that Gail was might have found herself in a role nationally because she talked so much about the community colleges as a national issue. And at the time with the Obama administration, maybe found herself in the Department of Education. Was that something? And I guess you would have gone along for the ride for that too, right?
Who knows? I mean, I'm not sure I would have wanted to leave New York at that point, just because of family connections here, and my daughter was in school. I think because she and I did have that conversation about what if the call came, and I think for her it would have to have been the right position.
Right.
And there are only a handful of right positions that you would take, where you have a lot of authority and a lot of room to be able to, create and build towards the vision you want. So it certainly was out there, but I think everyone recognizes that in selecting people for those positions, there's so many different elements that come into play. Do we have too many people from New York in the administration?
Right.
It could be as simple as that. Like, no, we can't go to New York again. We just picked some people to be at the transportation department and at Homeland Security. We can't go to New York on another position at a senior level. So you know that there's a lot that goes into these decisions that are almost irrespective of the person themselves.
Right.
So, but that call did not come, which I was happy about, because
you get to stay here.
Being Brooklyn born and bred, I don't know if I could live in DC that easily.
All right. Well, my daughter, who is Brooklyn, well, not born but bred, she's in DC and she loves it.
It is a good city. It is.
So 13 years ago, you come to LaGuardia. What were some of the things that Gail had? I mean, were you basically focused on the national question of community colleges, or were you involved with the local issues as well for the campus?
Yeah, I think it started out mostly looking at the work on a national level, just by the nature of where she was in her own trajectory and the work that was before her. But pretty quickly, I got roped into helping out on numerous initiatives here, including working with Achieving the Dream, which was an effort that we were involved with to kind of focus on improving retention and graduation. I got pulled into Middle States, the one back then that we were involved with, and increasingly just became a person who both Rosemary Talmadge, who many of us know and love dearly, worked very closely with Gail in really trying to make the office operation as functional as we could, and trying to figure out, what are the major initiatives she wants to push and try to get them to stick, here locally. I did a lot of work initially on fundraising, just because our development department at that point was very, very small, and I had done a fair amount of fundraising when I worked at that not-for-profit around reproductive health issues. So I helped out on grant writing and helped out on thinking about major donors and courting major donors. So the work expanded locally pretty quickly. So I was both doing the national work and helping Gail out on things here on the campus.
Yeah, it's interesting because the grants office, if I think back 13 years ago, those were the Bob Kahn years, and Bob, I guess Bob worked with all kinds of folks, and then that moved over to Ace, who was one of the biggest fundraisers. I remember May Dick. May Dick
Yeah.
was she was on the wall for folks who'd brought in over $1 million at the
I
time,
remember.
and then of course Bob was gone, and it's kind of moved back now. It's moved back into the E building, and it's closely tied to the foundation. I
Exactly.
mean, and I know that the foundation did, when going back to achieving the dream, and we found out that basically students were dropping out at every semester. It didn't matter, and we've determined that, well, if they're going to drop out at every semester, then why don't we grab the ones at the end and help them get out
Right.
through funds.
Exactly.
That the foundation had to step in, right?
Yeah,
at that point.
that was work that Jane McKillop, who was over
Right.
at ACE, and Michael Rodriguez kind of led, which was looking at exactly that issue of we lose students who have 45 credits or more,
Right.
seemingly in their last semester, who end
Right.
up leaving us because life circumstances intervene and force them to stop out. So what are the interventions you could build then that help students? Primarily, it's about getting them some financial support, which has been a major focus. And over time, of course, the funding has increased for the foundation considerably. And now we're in a whole new kind of
challenge grants.
Yeah, we're in a whole new place due to Kenneth Adams' work, where we have, the promise of a $15 million investment into the foundation, with the Tomorrow campaign almost close to achieving its goals. So, the ability to now support students so they don't have to move from part-time work to full-time work, or can help pay rent, or can help pay childcare, really has expanded considerably over time. And people like Karen Dubinsky have been instrumental, Laura Bartovics, the whole staff there has been just playing at a whole new level now with the ability to generate revenue for the foundation, which ultimately is money in the pockets of students.
Yeah, it's interesting because I interact with other folks from other colleges through the University Faculty Senate and CUNY Central, and LaGuardia is, I wouldn't want to say unique, but a kind of a leader in this finding money
Absolutely.
as a community college. I mean, certainly the senior colleges, through their research capacity, they find a lot of research grants,
Right.
and obviously there are other presidents who bring in dollars. I can think of Hunter College is kind of a leader in bringing in dollars, but LaGuardia is a leader, at least at the community college level.
Yeah, we are number one in terms of the community community colleges for fundraising for the foundation, and
Right.
for the research foundation, which is essentially government money, larger grants that come in. So in both respects, we are leaders. ACE has for a long time been a ability to kind of create these brilliant programs that are very responsive to what the community needs, and also responsive to what funders want to devote their resources to. And on the foundation side, which again is emergency aid, scholarships, stipended internships for students, that has exploded, and we've always led the community colleges. And again, our fundraising is tough because unlike the four-year colleges, which can rely on an alumni base because there's a deep connection that alumni have with their four-year college. And we all know of the successes City College has had in getting money out of some major donors. We don't have that. So our pitch is to, New Yorkers who care about the city. It isn't necessarily inherent knowledge that they have of the college. It's something that has to be built over time. And I think that got launched by Gail. Paul continued to maintain and develop those relationships, and Kenneth has brought it to a whole new inflection point. I mean, we are raising money in ways that's really been unimaginable just a few years ago.
I remember that after achieving the dream, or should I say, once the kind of the research work had been done on that, and then there was started the implementation piece came in, then the Gates Foundation started being a part of the LaGuardia family of sorts. You want to talk a little bit about that? I mean, did you play a role
we had,
in that?
Which was a moment. Bill Gates Sr. came to the college and participated in a roundtable, and then the Gates Foundation senior level people were very interested in the work happening at LaGuardia, and their focus really was on, at that point, pedagogy and the work that Gail was doing around the idea of improving teaching, that students at LaGuardia and at community colleges everywhere, the main experience they have is in the classroom. They walk through the doors, and yes, there might be some good coffee to grab at in the atrium, and there certainly are student clubs to get involved with, and co-curricular activities are crucial, but the majority of their time is in a classroom. So we have not paid attention to pedagogy and really thought about how do you create communities, which LaGuardia has been a leader with the Center for Teaching and Learning. How do you create online communities that are having faculty discussing their pedagogy, sharing their work with each other, and creating a peer environment where faculty can communicate and seek to tighten their teaching practices. And how do you do that across campuses, not just at one campus, but how do you do it where people are sharing experiences from what they're doing in Lincoln, Nebraska, to New York, to Miami. So the Gates Foundation really focused on, was intrigued by that, and Gail launched the Global Skill. No, I'm blanking on the acronym, but it was an effort to kind of look at pedagogy and improve pedagogy amongst community college faculty, which so often is ignored, and especially ignored for adjuncts who are seen as folks that are going to come to class but not necessarily engage, or not have the incentives, the financial incentives and the financial remuneration in order to participate in professional development work. So the Gates Foundation primarily was invested in that work.
Right. I just remember when because I've been in LaGuardia for 28 years. In the 90s, I spent most of my time teaching in the L building for photo, and then had full-time jobs and came back, teaching a lot of classes as an adjunct. And I just always remember Michael saying, because I was exploring, thinking about maybe I should just be working here full-time. And he said, well, go to the Center for Teaching and Learning and get involved with that. And he'd had a lot of success with ePortfolio, which I don't know if you played a role with the development. That's mostly, that was Brett Einen's baby.
Yep.
But, just getting involved with it. But I was not the typical adjunct, because typical adjuncts they have other jobs, which I did, but still, or they are working at other institutions and they don't have the time to stick around, or they're not offered an opportunity necessarily to participate in something. I remember I had to get special permission to be part of the Ford Foundation Difficult Dialogues, which Rosemary Talmadge was involved with as well, with Brett. And I had my good days, I had my bad days.
Well, I would definitely say you are atypical. And I mean that in the best of ways, in that you are like, I think there are three of you running around campus, because I'm like, wait, Hugo's doing that and he's doing that and he's doing that. How's that possible? So obviously there's got to be some, other people wearing the Hugo outfit running around the college.
Well, on Zoom, with Zoom on, like sometimes I'd had like 2 or 3 meetings going on at the same time, but just kind of keeping tabs on one thing while I was
Yeah. I mean,
participating in the
I
other.
would say, in Middle State certainly recognized it, the visiting team last week. Our Center for Teaching and Learning, and Eric Hoffman leads that up, and a number of people, Michelle Pizzo and others, are involved in supporting the work that happens. It's pretty rare to have the kind of um, entity exist that provides as widespread and thoughtful professional development work. And it is not something that I think we see at community colleges normally, this kind of major investment in helping faculty become better at what they do and doing it with each other. I mean, it's very special, I think. And my experience at LaGuardia has been, we have so many of those. We have so many things. The English Language Center, the work we do at the Fatherhood Academy. I mean, you can go on and on and on, in which there's things that we do here that are uniquely LaGuardia, that become national models, that are highly respected, that are
ASAP.
ASAP certainly is one. The work at the Wellness Center that's happening now. Rhonda's work with LaGuardia Cares, and kind of the unique approach that they've taken there in terms of being able to reach students. And I think just, LaGuardia, and again, it was recognized by the Middle States visiting team, is a place where there's, this unbelievable depth of commitment to doing what we do. And people work hard, they think hard, they innovate, they try to make things better. As we know, that doesn't exist at every institution. And
Yeah.
many of us know colleagues at other colleges in which they talk about how challenging an atmosphere it is. And I'm not saying we don't have challenges, we certainly do, many of them, but the spirit is here that, for me, has been like oxygen during my 13 years here. It's made the work so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because you talked about Middle States, since so we were both part of two rounds of Middle States. I found this second round a little bit easier, and I don't know whether it's because I understood the process going in, or whether we learned something and we're more organized. I mean, Gordon did a marvelous job the first time around, did a great job, but Reem and Justin did an amazing job this time.
Yeah, I think there. I came in at the tail end of the last time, so I saw a
Right.
little bit of it and was involved in some of the drafting. Was involved in the periodic report that we had to do 5 years in. But I do think we had um, a bit more. Organizationally, we were just tighter now. I think that there was more of an understanding. Last time we had 30 plus recommendations, I think, that we imposed on ourselves. For
Right.
example, I think that was a sign of an institution that said, sure, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. Hey, yeah, and that's a good idea. And I think we realized that we did a disservice to ourselves by doing that. That doesn't lead to a sharper report. And I think in part, Reem and Justin, who we've all, acknowledged as being like astounding leaders during this process, created both a very engaged environment where people really could tap into what was going on, and also created a structure which allowed for thinking to be done in a more coordinated, coherent way. It wasn't as free flowing, I think, as the first time around. And that may be somewhat of an evolution of what the college has become. I think we are better organized than we were 10 years ago. I think we're more disciplined than we are 10 years ago. And some people may think that that is, not a benefit. I actually do think it's been beneficial for the college to kind of sharpen its focus a bit. around what we believe are the strategies that are most effective in moving the retention and graduation rates. So I think our discipline has been a benefit.
It's 1:29. I'm just going to do a quick station break. The show is What's Going On. I'm your host, Hugo Fernandez, here at LaGuardia Web Radio, WLGR. And my guest today is Robert Jaffe, who is LaGuardia's longtime senior advisor to the president and will be retiring at the end of this month. So we're moved into the section which I call the greatest hits. And I mean, you've been talking about a lot of successes, but this is an opportunity for you to talk about things that you were involved with, which you think you're either the most proud of or you thought were the most important for the college. So tough, huh?
Always tough. I mean, I would start with that opportunity to work with Gail, Paul, and Kenneth, GPK, I guess. And with each person, they needed something different from me in terms of the work I was doing. Gail had been president for a good number of years when I started. She didn't need me taking care of certain things. She really wanted someone that focused on elevating the profile of LaGuardia. Let's amplify the message that she had, which was the benefit of, and let's elevate and amplify the work here. And I guess one aspect of that was the 3-part New York Times story that Jania Belafonte from the Times wrote that I think helped really seriously, gave this college and any college really unprecedented coverage. And I not many people have heard the story, but Jania had written a column in which she mentions a LaGuardia student in passing, and that student had encountered challenges in getting their work. And it was someone who Jania knew personally that she incorporated into her article. Jania had never called the college to kind of find out what happened. Not that we could talk about her specifically, but does this happen to many students? So Gail was not happy at first because she felt like the reporter had fallen short. And I said, well, we can never talk about that individual student, but why don't you write to Jania and just invite her for a visit and say, hey, you mentioned LaGuardia. We're much bigger than what you reported. And Jania ended up coming. She loved the place, obviously, was fascinated by what we're doing here. And over time, she went to her editors. Not easy to do, to get a 3-part major, I mean, those were long articles, into the Times. So I feel like at that moment, the benefit I brought to the table was simply turning to Gail and saying, hey, Gail, don't write that screed that you want to write, ripping Jania for not doing the reporting you hope. Why don't you reach out to her and invite her? And it's kind of an example of the kind of work that I did in advising Gail and others. But then I had the opportunity to work with Paul after Gail stepped down, and Paul, a very different leader, perfect for that moment of transition because he's trusted by all. And he also confronted COVID and confronted his own personal tragedy. And Paul just brought, at a moment when there was so much chaos, remember March 2020, so much is happening. Paul was the one who was the deliberative person in the room. We were, reacting in the moment. And Paul, in the way that Paul is, was so thoughtful and asking questions and sitting back and asking another question just before a decision got made. And that was a moment of rapid decisions. And then I had the opportunity to work with the transition committee, with the university as the liaison for the hiring of the next president. That was in some ways more of an administrative role, but had the opportunity to, talk to a lot of people, organize a lot of people for conversations with the search firm. Felt like I was doing it in a way that was, trying to get as much inclusion into that process as possible. And then, of course, Kenneth gets named. And as I've told him many a time, I really thought it was a moment where, I'd be shown the door like, hey, thanks, but, I'm ready to run a college, and there's some good people at LaGuardia, and I'm not sure I need you. And he, he and I clicked, and I think part of it was that I offered him really advice that was as honest as I could be from my perspective, with all the limitations of what one person's perspective could be, but offered him, just advice that I think was really important for him to help understand where the college was, what some of his shortcomings are as coming in as a president at that moment in time into LaGuardia, and what are some areas that he would need to take action on to really, build support and trust amongst the community. So it's been, another different experience of working with Kenneth as he's moved through a transition. I think is, solidly now in place. Has brought in Nayeli, who many have met and will meet, as his chief of staff, and Nayeli is absolutely fantastic. And I think Kenneth is going to kind of move this college into a whole, another beautiful place as he finds a provost to take over for Paul, as he continues to build, his understanding and engagement with the college, as he builds the community connections we need. So, long-winded answer, but I think, I've had that opportunity to work with three amazing people, offering different levels of support for each and different kinds of advice and counsel. But it's been, greatest hits have been built into each of those experiences, I
Right.
think.
I remember when Kenneth was coming on board that we came up, and it was part of that firm who did the hiring,
Right.
talked about the transition committee,
Exactly.
and you found yourself in that role. And I can't remember when we first started out, I think that we all had concerns and we would share them with you. And you were good about it, because I think people had some major concerns, things that we hadn't dealt with over time, or maybe things that needed dealing with. Let's put it that way. And you heard it
Yeah, I mean,
as
I saw my role really being, listen hard. What are people saying? What are they not saying? Who are voices that need to be in the room that are not in the room? There certainly was work that the college needed to address around diversity, equity, and inclusion issues that seemed to be, so important, given, again, when he, given the college's dialogue around that issue, and this level of frustration at things having not necessarily been achieved that perhaps people felt was possible or promised. And you had the George Floyd murder happening that summer, on top of course, a series of events that made the issues of racial justice again an imperative for us to confront. So it was important for me to say to Kenneth, not that he needed to hear it from me, but you need to open your door wide and engage with the community around issues of DEI, particularly as a white man. It is important for you to, talk to Dr. Vanessa Bing, listen to Wendy Nicholson, who's now our executive director of DEI, and others, in order to, and you, and many others, and understand what is, not just understand, but understand and then help facilitate the creation of work that will advance in a very serious way our equity at the college. The employee engagement survey obviously had revealed problems and differences between perspectives of people of color and white employees, and same with the coach survey. So, I saw my job as pointing him to the places where there was knowledge and access had to be built. Because for him, hey, I'm president of LaGuardia. Where do I go? Where's the bathroom? And again, this was all on Zoom, which only compounded it to some extent making it a lot harder for all of us to figure out how to make that transition a successful one.
Yeah, I mean, looking back at the Adams administration, just we're not even out of two. Is it 2 years? Has it been?
No,
When did?
it's like 18 months. I guess it'll be two
Right.
years, July. He
Yeah.
started in
Right.
August, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Exactly. And a lot has happened in those 2 years.
Wow.
Uh, Certainly with administrative leadership, a lot of things have happened. Obviously, I mean the pandemic that it, what it forcing us to go online and uh, now trying to transition back and all of the he's called himself the pandemic president, and
Mhm.
I've called him that, and I guess he'll be that until we're done with this. But also a lot has happened in that it's not like we stopped to just handle the health crisis and the pedagogical crisis of online ed. A
Mhm.
lot of other stuff has happened. Uh, if you were to give him a grade as being a faculty member, how do you think he's handled it?
So I would do grades in different ways, and my office is not far, so I'm not sure he's watching, but you
I
know,
can't tell. Usually I get a count of how many people are watching the show, and for whatever reason I can't see a number.
well,
So maybe they've upgraded Twitch somehow.
I would say, I would give Kenneth very, very high grades, and I say that as a fairly tough critic, and and I'm going to go as high as an A minus, high B plus kind of thing, and here's why. I think, he has, in what is a difficult environment, given that so much of the work was happening over Zoom, he's he's successfully transitioned to becoming the president. There's no question that he's leading the organization, right? And that to me is not easily done, and I know of some situations of presidents where that hasn't been successful. And I don't think he's done it by elbowing people out of the way. I think he's done it by listening hard. I think he's done it by engaging people. He really has open access. If you write an email to Kenneth right now, I'm guaranteeing you'll get a response by 5 o'clock today. And he reads every email. He's open to almost any meeting. So I think in terms of transparency, inclusion, the engagement with governance has been unprecedented. Paul started that by inviting the college senate chair and faculty council president to cabinet meetings, but Kenneth has upped that involvement in a serious way. I think the union, personally, I mean, they could would obviously speak for themselves, but I think the attempt has been to engage them and share information, and again have an open door. So I think an important part of it is that aspect of engagement, and I think that's been there. Fundraising is through the roof, both on the ACE side. Academic Affairs has brought in some significant grants, and the foundation is having an unprecedented level of fundraising at a time when we know helping students pay for college is critically important. Like, that the choices are that much more difficult because of the pandemic. I think he's made some difficult but important staffing moves, and I think they are the right things to do. He's made investments like into the DEI position, and I think that at a time when you're not really creating any new positions, that was done. I think the elevation of doctors Faye Butler and Gail Backus Jarrett was a really smart move for a division that was facing some real challenges internally. Um, I think consolidating the grants and development office was a really smart move. So I think on a staffing level, and I would say like the college is well positioned for what's to come. The amount of community networking that's happening, is at a high level. There's, those things take a little bit of time to blossom, because you plant the seeds and then a funder or an entity that we're going to partner with. But I can tell you, like, there's some cool stuff down on the horizon that will be breathtakingly rich for our students and, exciting for faculty and staff to be involved with. So, I give him high marks, and it comes out of, I mean, I have to say, leaving LaGuardia now is easy, because I feel like it's in good hands. And I mean, we had a cabinet meeting this morning. I was looking around that room. The only 3 people who were in the executive council, the cabinet equivalent, when I started was Shahir, Henry Saltiel, and Paul. So that room is a totally different room, and it's a team. There's a level of camaraderie and intellectual respect and dialogue at a very high level. People can disagree with each other in a respectful but important way. And I think Kenneth has helped create a leadership team that is rich and taps people's real skills. So I give him a thumbs up.
Yeah, you're a tough grader, though. Uh, so we're at the part where we could either take questions, which I don't. People usually don't send questions because they got to become members of Twitch to do it. But by the way, I've been told we have a pretty good audience out there.
Cool.
And so I would say at this point, I would ask any kind of advice you would like to. You're leaving us behind. What some of the things that we should be thinking about, faculty, staff, and students. As you leave, you have this ability,
Yeah.
to,
I mean, I appreciate that. I think, I'm going to start with, one that I thought a lot about over the years because of the work with Achieving the Dream and continuing was, because I don't feel qualified to speak about kind of the academic work, I co-taught at one point with Bayana, but, not a place that I have played in. So the non-academic supports for our students are so critically important. And, what we face is a challenge of scale. We have more students that need mental health services than we have staff that could provide. We have more students that need the work of LaGuardia Cares, more students that need advising than we have advisors. So, wrestling with that and really beginning to think through how do we, create ways for students to get timely support and timely advising in particular that is understood by the student and coherent to the student. I think what we know is students come in often too late. And no matter how much we bombard them with social media and how much we bombard them with emails and how much we bombard them at orientation, you don't think you need that service till you need it. So how do we both communicate the availability of services and how do we structure ourselves to be better able to respond? Because we know that student who is having the mental health crisis or that student who needs help with because of food insecurity, they need it at that moment. And they need to come to us earlier because we can help them if they come to us earlier. So I think that to me is a place of huge challenge, not unique to LaGuardia. I think people are thinking about it and doing great work, but it's so vital because we know we lose students as we start our conversation at every point in their academic career. So I would say that's one. The second is, it's that tension between innovation and being this place that is like high energy. Let's think, let's create, people want to build new things and having the discipline to also just focus. And I think on retention and graduation, first year seminar is a perfect example where we had a lot of discipline. We scaled very quickly. We provided professional development, but we made investments. We put down a bet. We said, this is a place that the college is going to invest in because we think this is going to have a material impact on retention and graduation, and it has. And often we've done things in the past that would start something and we wouldn't assess it and we'd move on and we'd tinker with it. This was, to me, a most solid example of being innovative and disciplined. And I think we need that. And again, I think the Middle States process revealed a more disciplined institution than we were 10 years ago. And I guess the third is, it's a gift to be able to work here. And I think a lot of times it's very hard. We're bureaucracy. We're in a bureaucracy of CUNY. We're in a bureaucracy of the city. We're in the bureaucracy of America. There's a lot of things that kind of get in the way of people being able to do their job. And I think the more we can kind of give people ownership over what their work is, and listen to them as to what they think is needed to improve advising, what's needed to improve the work we do, listen very closely to people on the front lines, but also make sure that we create an environment that's just joyful and just a lot of fun. Because I think there are a lot of people who are, that isn't necessarily present in their everyday work experience. And we have an obligation at a senior leadership level and at a managerial level to make sure that that's built into their work. I love what I do. I've loved coming to work. Everyone should experience that. And I think it's the obligation of the college to help figure that out. And some of it we have limitations on because of that bureaucracy, but how do we burst that? Not that we can't push the bureaucracy out of the way, but how do we make it possible for people to find joy in their work? And I would just point to the employee engagement survey, which found that in Vice President Shahir Irfan's division, there was a high level of morale and job satisfaction. He's doing something right. We have a lot to learn. I have such respect for Shahir because he created an environment that, people love to come to work. And we saw it during the pandemic, security guards showing up, people handing out computers at all hours, people maintaining the buildings, which had to be maintained, just showing up in the most brilliant way. So we have to do that across the college, and that's not an easy task. So 3 areas of challenge and focus.
We have to clone Shahir.
Clone Shahir would be great.
Right. Well, I mean, it's what I say to my students, which is, do you want a job or do you want a career?
Right.
And when they ask what the difference is, I say, well, in the job, you're looking at the clock every minute and you just can't wait to get out of there. The career, there isn't enough time to do all the things
right.
we want to do. And it's that, like the way you paint the picture of LaGuardia. LaGuardia has a career because we've certainly identified the need and want to reach it. I mean, I know that people have mixed feelings about our motto, dare to do more. I think one of the things we need to dare to do is to also take time for ourselves as well. I think that's one of the things the pandemic taught us, right?
Absolutely.
But I think that,
But I would just add on to that is, it is about building, look, we have to recognize there are people whose work may not be able to provide the same satisfaction as being a faculty member in a classroom of dynamic students, or being, someone who is helping faculty improve their teaching, whatever that role is. And we have to recognize that people have potentially have jobs that are challenging and hard to do day in and day out, particularly over the course of 20, 30 years. So how do we build their inclusion and create a sense of equity that they are as important to the institution and valued and their voices are heard? So what opportunities are presented to them? So it's not someone who is simply, going through the motions of doing the same work, but are given the same opportunities that you are and I are to expand and do creative things that kind of tap into their, their unique soul.
Opportunity.
Yeah.
That's what we have to provide. Well, we're almost out of time, so I wanted to give you a chance to say any last thank yous or any last words you'd like to share.
Wow. Well, I appreciate this opportunity very much. I mean, it's really it's flown for me. That was a quick hour. I'm not going to walk through individuals because that would be challenging. I think I'll leave people out. But, I've had the opportunity to most recently work with the marketing and communications and external affairs team. As I kind of took on that role of heading up that work, and there's incredible talent there. Those are individuals who work so hard, have unique skills, could take those skills and bring it out into the private sector and probably make more money and do that work in a very different setting. And they've chosen to be at LaGuardia, and I have tremendous respect for their absolute commitment. People dealing with website changes that had to be up because people were going to be relying on that information. We had the return to campus newsletter going out every week. That was not easy, and people like Gina were involved in crafting that and sharpening it and making sure that we had information flowing. So I think I do want to do a special shout out to them. I want to thank my three bosses, Kenneth and Paul and Gail, for letting me sit in this seat. This is like a real privilege to be able to, offer, my skills to them and feel like I was making a contribution. I mean, I always felt as if there was a level of respect for what I had to offer, and it was really a gift to be able to work here and do that with them. And then just, there's innumerable colleagues who have inspired me and I've learned from. I've watched them do their thing. I've watched people, speak to groups and move people to tears. I've watched people read poetry. I've watched, students do theater performances and musical performances. I've watched the philosophy club hold its events and engage the community in philosophy. I've watched ping pong tournaments, and it's kind of like a blessing to come into a building, which now we're seeing that again, which is like humming with energy and creativity and learning and teaching. And most people going to work and thinking about how to make more profit for the boss and the shareholders. In many settings, that's kind of the focus is, how are we going to maximize our profit? We get to, maximize learning and maximize teaching, maximize making our democracy a more secure one, which is a really, imperiled democracy, I think, right now, not just ours, but around the world. We have this opportunity. So I thank everyone, faculty and staff and students, for allowing me to, join in on this unbelievably wonderful enterprise that, I can only look at with immense pride and gratitude for being able to do what I do. And thank you to you, because you're one of those people who do that kind of unbelievable work with students day in and day out. And kind of, I've seen you leading your students through things, and you're doing it in an incredible way.
Thanks. Thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely.
Today, my show has been with doing the exit interview for Robert Jaffe, who is our LaGuardia longtime senior advisor to 3 presidents and who is retiring at the end of this month. I want to thank everybody for watching, for listening. Thank you for all your positive energy all these years, and we only wish you the best in whatever you tackle next.
Sounds good. I'll be around.
Very good. And come back.
I will.
Mr. Pope, my engineer, please take us out as we came in with some more Elton John. Thanks for watching and listening.
Thank you.